Morning. As Claire said, welcome to our ECW booth. My name is Philipp Schott. I'm an author and veterinarian living in Winnipeg, Canada. And I have a treat for you today because I'm going to talk about two books, two for the price of one, as the saying goes. I have two books out this year from ECW. First one is 54 Pigs, a mystery. And this came out about 3 weeks ago. And then coming in the fall, in October is, I don't have an arc for it, so maybe you can see the screen. We've got The Battle Cry of the Siamese Kitten, which is the third in my collection of veterinary stories. So a little bit about 54 Pigs first before we get into the Siamese Kitten. So 54 Pigs is my first attempt at a mystery novel. This will be a series, and it's called a Dr. Bannerman vet mystery. So I am, as I said, a veterinarian as well as an author. So I take advantage of my experience as a veterinarian to create this world of Dr. Peter Bannerman, who lives in the fictional small Manitoba lakeside town of New Selfos, which is an Icelandic Canadian community. For those of you familiar with Manitoba, sort of mirrors Gimli across the lake, which is a real Icelandic Canadian community. In my fictional world, New Selfos was declared by Maclean's magazine to be the quirkiest town in Canada. For you Americans online here, Maclean's is kind of like Time or Newsweek. So it's a quirky town. Dr. Bannerman's a quirky guy. Although it's never declared in the book, you'll pick up probably that he's somewhere on the autism spectrum. He is very obsessed with details and facts, obsessed with mathematics, very analytical, perhaps not as sharp about reading people, understanding human motivation. So that plays a role in the plot. I'll just give you the little thumbnail. Peter is out on a call, veterinarian in the country, and he sees a swine barn explode in the distance. He realizes it is his friend's, Tom Pearson's swine barn, rushes there. No people are there. It's too late to save the pigs. The barn burns down. Shortly after, human remains are found in the barn. And his friend Tom is the primary suspect in this murder. Peter doesn't believe that Tom is capable of such a thing, has lots of reasons for thinking that the police are on the wrong scent. So he sets about trying to find evidence to clear Tom's name with the help of his dog. The dog is a character as well. The dog's name is Pippin, and he is a championship scent hound, a dog who is able to pick up on smells. And so the two of them set off to try and figure this out, and a series of events occur, ultimately leading Peter onto the frozen surface of Lake Winnipeg, where his life is in danger. It's the first in a series. 6 Ostriches is already written and will be published next spring. So I hope readers enjoy this. So far, things seem to be going well in its first couple of weeks of life out on the market. So the second book, and what we're going to focus a little bit more on, is The Battle Cry of the Siamese Kitten. This is the third in my series of veterinary anecdotes, recollections, stories, essays, if you will. The first was the first book I had ever published, and that was The Accidental Veterinarian, which came out in 2019. It was a Canadian bestseller, translated into, I think, half a dozen languages now. When I wrote The Accidental Veterinarian, I thought, okay, there's 60 stories here drawn from my 30 years in practice, and that's it. I've drunk from that well. There's nothing left. I've told all the stories, all my best stories, and I was going to move on and write other things. But as it happened, I did have more stories, and was very quickly able to cobble together another 60, which became How to Examine a Wolverine, released also by ECW last fall. It's also doing quite well. And then I thought, okay, this is really, really it. There's no way I've got any more stories, anything more interesting to tell that anybody's going to want to hear or read. But sure enough, there were another 60 stories that kind of bubbled up in my head. And the battle cry of the Siamese Kitten was born, to be published, I believe, first week of October this coming fall. I think that's really it, but I guess you never know. So when I say stories and essays, they're recollections from my time in practice. They're all, I call them little story snacks, like tapas. You can kind of dip in, dip out. You don't have to read them in a particular order. Excuse me. They're mostly on the lighter side. Try to keep it lighter, a little bit humorous, if you will. But some, I mean, veterinary medicine confronts the full range of human emotions, from joy and happiness and laughter through to sadness and anger and frustration. And it's all in there. I try to pull the curtain back on what goes on in a veterinary clinic, and it is that full spectrum. And we deal with the full spectrum of humanity as well. There isn't just a particular kind of pet person. It's all kinds of people, all walks of life that come in. I like to say that veterinary medicine is a story engine. It is. There's just this intersection of love and money. It drives a lot of strong emotions, and it makes for interesting encounters. And of course, animals are fascinating. I mean, who's not interested in animals? So I will, I'll maybe do a couple of readings, read a few pieces from the battle cry, the Siamese Kitten, and then open it up to questions. Hard to know which stories to read. I've just been going through the final edits, so these happen to actually be the ones I just read last night to look for typos, etc. So the first one is going to be, first one I'm going to read for you is called The Cone Heads. The official symbol of veterinary medicine is the letter V, superimposed on the rod of Scepalus, you know, the snake twining around the upright stick. The unofficial symbol, however, is the cone of shame. Before I go on, sorry, these pages stuck together. Before I go on to discuss the cone, I want to say a word about the official symbol. And I'm just going to pause the reading to show that there are illustrations in the book. The very talented cartoonist Brian Gable, who's the editorial cartoonist for the Toronto Globe and Mail, has done illustrations for my books. So I want to say a word about the official symbol, and the word is lame. It's a lame symbol because it's a derivative of the human medical symbol, making veterinarians look like a junior league version. If anyone is going to use a symbol with snakes, it should be us. They should have to superimpose an H on it. We actually handle snakes, whereas most modern physicians run away screaming from them. The symbol originated in an ancient Greek healing cult involving releasing snakes among the patients. Presumably, this frightened the patients into at least claiming that they were feeling better so they could leave. As that's no longer the standard of practice, I feel the physicians should get their own symbol now, and then we can keep the plain rod and snake without the tacked on V. Failing that, we could politely ask the veterinary surgical specialists to allow us to use their centaur logo for the whole profession. Centaurs are cool. End of digression. On to the cone heads. Officially known as Elizabethan collars, or e-collars for short, these lampshade-shaped items are as indispensable to the veterinarian as the stethoscope, the syringe, and the scalpel. It's one of the things that distinguishes us from our human medical counterparts, although I'm told that a local vasectomy surgeon keeps a large e-collar in his office as a joke. What a card. Humans can be told not to lick their wounds and incisions, and generally speaking, they won't. Dogs and cats, on the other hand, well, the point is obvious. So why do they lick? And is it even a problem? Second question first. I have had quite a few people declare that it is natural to lick a wound. Yes, it is. But it is also natural to poop indoors, and it is natural to die soon after our reproductive years. Natural behaviors work best in natural environments, and when there is no better alternative. Dogs and cats lick for two main reasons. The first is to clean the area. If it's an accidental wound, initially this can be helpful. By all means, get those bits of bark out of the cut from that sharp branch you ran into. The problem is they don't know when to stop. In the wild, a wound would keep getting dirty, so it made sense to keep cleaning it. But our pets eventually come into a, hopefully, clean home. At that point, they're just introducing bacteria from their mouths. A version of the licking is natural myth holds that their oral bacteria are beneficial. People who say this have never looked inside the mouth of a middle-aged dog with dental disease, which is to say most middle-aged dogs. It's like peering through the fetid gates of microbial Hades. There's a reason you are always prescribed antibiotics after a cat or dog bites you. I remember a colleague who didn't bother and her hand turned black. True story. But I'm veering into digression again. The other problem with the licking instinct is that they cannot differentiate between a dirty accidental wound and a clean surgical incision. I imagine dogs and cats waking up after an operation and thinking, what the heck? Those people were all so friendly and nice and petting me and saying how good I was, but then bam, I had an instant nap and now I wake up and there's this cut on my belly. Did they drop something sharp on me? Didn't they even notice? Losers. And it's got these bits of string stuck to it. Groan. Oh, well, I know what to do. It's just like that, those bits of bark that were in that cut from that evil stick. The second reason dogs and cats lick is for comfort. It likely, albeit subconsciously, reminds them of when they were small and their mothers licked them. It's soothing to them the way thumb sucking or hair twiddling is for some people. The self-soothing can become addictive and tip into obsessive compulsive behavior. Anxious cats will lick their bellies until they're bald, and anxious dogs will lick their paws until they turn rust-colored. By the way, that color, that rust color, is due to a substance called porphyrin in their saliva reacting to the air. A note of caution. Sometimes these behaviors are also due to itchiness from allergies, so don't assume your pet is developing an unhealthy obsession and just slap that cone of shame on him. That would be agonizing if it's a legitimate itch. There are many excellent medicines these days for allergies. Even for true excessive self-soothing and anxiety, a cone is not the best solution. The necessary behavioral therapy for these guys is well beyond the scope of this story. Now that would be a digression. So ask your veterinarian for advice on this, please. But for wounds and incisions, cones are still the way to go. Theoretically, bad tasting sprays and ointments are possible alternatives, but many pets laugh at these. You've seen what they're willing to eat, right? Fortunately, however, cones have come a long way. When I first started in practice, we only had the rigid opaque plastic ones. Dogs crashed into things and cleared coffee tables with them, and cats got stuck under couches and in cat doors. The modern ones are clear to improve peripheral vision and a little more flexible. They're still a nuisance though. Even better for some pets are the floppy cloth ones, true Elizabethan collars that Shakespeare wouldn't be ashamed to be associated with, and the inflatable donut style ones. I say for some pets, because these are more easily defeated by the agile, the determined, the Houdini-like. You may have to try a few different options and sizes and means of attachment before you hit on one that's a reasonable compromise between a nuisance and effectiveness. So maybe the best veterinary symbol would be to put an e-collar on a centaur. You could also put one on the skipperless snake, but that would just be dumb, as snakes can easily reach around any collar. But a centaur with a cone wouldn't be dumb, not at all, right? So that's the cone heads. We're about 8:15 in my time zone. I maybe have time for one more really quick one, and then we can go to questions. Somebody will stop me if I'm going on too long. All right. You probably want to hear about a specific animal. So I weighed between a little dog that got into a dog fight. It was a cute little dog, and between a snow leopard. And the snow leopard won out. So you're going to hear the heart of a leopard. Every child has a favorite animal. In my case, there were several. I couldn't settle on just one or rank them, lest that I'd make the runner-ups feel bad. How they would know about their rank, let alone understand or care, was not a question I thought to examine. My menagerie of favorites was almost entirely populated by the quirky and the odd, platypuses, kiwis, yaks, beavers, llamas, and the like. I'm not sure why this was, but there was one more traditional pick as well, the snow leopard. It wasn't because it was such a beautiful animal, as, given the foregoing list, looks obviously didn't register with me. Instead, it had something to do with its solitude and its mysteriousness. The fact that it was so powerful but had almost never been seen in the wild made a big impression on me. This impression was cemented when, as a teenager, I read Peter Matthiessen's classic, The Snow Leopard, in which the author goes to Nepal in search of the animal, but it behaves like a ghost, more a presence felt than something he could see. Cool. Fast forward 10 years to my move to Winnipeg in 1990 and my first visit to the zoo. The Assiniboine Park Zoo had an astonishing collection of animals, including, you guessed it, snow leopards among its 3 varieties of extremely rare Asian leopards. These were not ghosts, but gorgeous flesh and blood creatures only meters away. There were 2 in the cage, draped over wooden platforms, lounging, swishing their magnificent tails back and forth, completely ignoring me as I gawked. By this point in my life, I was much more impressed by beauty than I had been as a child. It was hard to imagine a more beautiful animal. Fast forward again, this time 30 years, to a phone call from the zoo vet. Could I possibly come to the zoo and perform an ultrasound on one of their snow leopard cubs? Normally, they would bring the animal to me, but as the cub was small, they didn't want to have him away from his mother for very long. Could I? Are you kidding me? Could I ever? However, I kept my professional demeanor intact and asked her to wait a moment while I checked my calendar. Perfunctory checking done, I agreed. The cub had some odd breathing episodes and there was a history of heart disease in his family, so they wanted to be absolutely sure he was okay. On the appointed day, my wife Lorraine, also a vet, came along as my assistant and was, if anything, more excited than I was. We drove up to the secure gate at the side of the zoo complex where we were met by the zoo vet and directed to follow her van. We took a winding route behind the enclosures until we came to the back of the snow leopard area. Lorraine was positively vibrating with excitement. I kept fending off paranoid thoughts that I had forgotten some important part of my ultrasound machine, as I had never used it away from the clinic before. We were ushered into a small wooden building and shown a metal exam table against one wall where I could set up my equipment. While I was fussing with the settings, I heard a gasp from Lorraine. The snow leopard cub had arrived. One of the zookeepers was carrying him and carried him in from an adjacent building attached to their pen. She cradled him tightly in her arms, leather gauntlets protecting her hands. He was stunning. He stared at us unblinking with pale blue eyes. He was 2 months old and he weighed as much as an adult house cat, even though he appeared to be roughly double the size of one. Yes, that's how fluffy he was. If the thought of a fluffy snow leopard cub that you can cradle in your arms doesn't already put you into diabetic coma of cuteness, then consider the sounds he makes. This adorable bundle of fluff is a leopard, and he knows it. He knows that he's supposed to be wild and a wild and fierce thing. So he made wild and fierce sounds at us. Grr, grr, grr. Take it from me. Nothing is as cute as something trying to be ferocious when it is manifestly not ferocious. At least not very ferocious. They did wear those heavy leather gloves after all. The zookeeper said they could continue to handle him like this without sedation until about 6 months of age. The ultrasound itself was anticlimactic, in a good way. When ultrasound is exciting, it's because something is wrong. Nobody wants that. The room was darkened. The leopard growled quietly, and we watched a black and white image come flickering to life on my screen. It was the heart of a leopard, and its beat was strong. That's it. Those are my readings. If we have questions or discussion, I'm wide open to all of that, but the mystery or the pet stories or anything else. The weather in Winnipeg, you name it. Ah, there's a chat column over here. Okay. So there's from Caroline S. Thank you for your question. We've got, what was the process like writing about a fictional veterinarian? How accurate do you think Peter is to your day-to-day? Pretty darn accurate. So the one little wrinkle is that I'm a small animal veterinarian. Winnipeg is a city of 800,000 people. I'm in the middle of the city. I haven't professionally seen a cow, a pig, or a horse since vet school, so over 30 years ago. So it was a little bit of a stretch for me to picture a veterinarian who's also working in large animals, and I expect to be getting hate mail from my large animal colleagues any day now. It hasn't happened yet, but the book is still new. No, I think very accurate, and that's why I picked a veterinarian as a amateur detective, because I wanted to ground it in authenticity like that. And I hope that comes through in the book. Also, I think veterinarians make excellent detectives because of what we do for a living. But that's an aside. From Claire, we have here, how did you first decide to write a fictional mystery series instead of your own life experiences? Yeah, great question. Well, I ran out of life experiences, number one. Number two, a couple things. Mystery series seem to me to be a good way to explore character and location. And I like the idea of writing one-off fiction. I hope to do that as well. We'll do that. But I also want to explore characters and place over a series of books over time. And mystery seemed the best way to do that. And honestly, if you haven't read the book yet, the mystery is just the thing that drives the plot. Mostly what really got me going, got me interested, was describing the characters and describing the location. So I hope the readers enjoy that aspect of it. A little bit like I got some inspiration from Alexander McCall Smith and his Botswana Ladies Detective Series mysteries in that regard, and also Tony Hillerman, for people who remember him from the 80s and 90s with his Navajo reservation mysteries. From Alex, we've got, I love Pippin in the book. Will he continue to play a role as series continues? Absolutely, yes. Pippin definitely plays a big role in 6 Ostriches, and already 11 Huskies is in my mind. So, and Pippin is there for sure. I think it's a cool angle to have an animal in there without making it cartoonish. I mean, I'm obviously, given what I do, I understand animals. So I make them as real as I can. From Paulette here, can you tell us more about the second mystery novel in the series? Sure, yeah. So 6 Ostriches, in fact, if you read 54 Pigs, you get a sample chapter at the end for 6 Ostriches. So 6 Ostriches starts with Peter attending a hobby farm where a recently retired military pilot has decided to open an exotic animal farm, including some ostriches. And this is somewhat real. There was an ostrich farm for a little while in Western Manitoba. So the ostriches can live in Manitoba. And this ostrich has swallowed an object. So Peter has to do surgery, and he discovers that this is a Viking artifact. So is it real? Is it not? How does this tie into the Icelandic heritage of New Selfos? And does it tie into a series of animal mutilations that start to occur? And of course, there is a murder as well. So I think that's all I'm going to say about 6 Ostriches, but that's gets it rolling. One thing I can, in addition, say is Manitoba is all about the weather and the landscape and the seasons. So 54 Pigs is set in the winter, and winter is a character in the novel. 6 Ostriches is set in the spring, which is what we've got right now with flooding and all that. Spring is also a character in 6 Ostriches, and 11 Huskies will be set in the summer. So I'm working my way through the seasons. People can see my methodical mind at work there. I think we've got time for a few more questions if anybody else has anything they'd like to say. Otherwise, I can ramble on about New Selfos and the quirky community there. One thing I should say is that Peter's brother-in-law is an RCMP officer, so that adds an element. Kevin is his wife's brother, is an RCMP officer, big, burly, Viking bearded fellow, and so they're close, but there's a distance there because Kevin doesn't appreciate Peter meddling with police business. So there's also a question here about what was New Selfos inspired by. Inspired by Gimli. So for those of you that have never been up here, Gimli is a real treasure. It's the largest Icelandic population outside of Iceland, is right here. in Manitoba, an hour north of Winnipeg on the shores of Lake Winnipeg. For those of you who don't know, Lake Winnipeg's like an ocean. It's not technically one of the Great Lakes, but it's a very, very large lake. And I didn't feel I could write about Gimli because I don't live there. And also I'm not from there. And also that would constrain me. So I mirrored Gimli on the other side of the lake, created a rival community. And there's a whole rivalry that plays a role in the book. And then I've got a sandbox to play and I can rearrange the geography and the characters and so forth. From Alex here, write characters very well, thank you. Do you take inspiration from people in your real life? Yeah, I try hard not to do too much in case people recognize themselves. Some of them are archetypes. A lot of them are conglomerates, bits and pieces. Certainly Peter is, I think, a really extreme version of me, probably. So my wife, as she's reading the manuscript, kind of looking over it and looking at me, going, And from Sammy, what happens when you complete your 4 seasons? I hope so. I mean, as long as people keep reading and writing, I'll keep writing. If people keep reading and buying the books, yeah, I've actually got 5 of them mapped out in my mind. So we're back to winter. At some point, we might just stick with winter too. People seem to like winter. It's a really exotic thing for most of the world to the type of winter that we have here in Manitoba. But yes, I've got fall's book in my mind. It involves kittens, involves a horror. And I've got the next winter one in mind too, involves horses. I think we got 1 minute left. All right, and that looks like the wrap up. Yes, and thank you from me also for everyone for coming. And I guess this is the first one of the day, so enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. I will just sit here and stare at the camera until somebody turns me off.